Good. All right, we'll open up the meeting. Town of Scituate Board of Health meeting. Town of Scituate Selectmen's Hearing Room, Monday, June 3rd, 2013. And I'll take a motion to accept the amended agenda.
Yeah, I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll move right into 7:10 p.m. Public hearing, 7 Marshfield Ave, septic system. Rick Grady, Grady Consulting, LLC.
I'm actually standing in for Rick Grady tonight. My name is Gary Walcott, also with Grady Consulting. Rick's out of town at a convention this week, so
I'm Adam Brodsky. I'm an environmental lawyer. I'm working with the applicant. Steve Lehman, he's with Humrock Seafood LLC, which is a tenant in Bruce Nolan's building. And Jennifer's likely filled you in, but we're here on an application for a disposal system construction permit. Kind of an unusual process. We actually have applied for a permit with Jennifer. There are no local upgrade approvals required and no variances required. But Jennifer thought it appropriate that the board review this application rather than herself. The application was originally submitted in March of 2011. At that time, we proposed a new system with new grease-trap tanks, 2 septic tanks, pump chamber, and leaching chambers. And that particular design actually required local upgrade approval as well as variances. It had a design flow of 1,535 gallons per day. We subsequently were able to locate 3 existing tanks that actually were used for prior operations at the property. And we've redesigned the system so that we're going to use those tanks rather than install new tanks, and Gary will explain specifically what's going on. That eliminated the need for a local upgrade approval or any variances. While the tanks are located within the setback, they're existing tanks. We don't have to install any new structures. And under Title V, there's no prohibition to using existing tanks. And so that's why we don't need a local upgrade approval. During that process, the uses used for a design flow were refined. So now the uses are restaurant, fast food, warehouse without a cafeteria, and office. And we have a design flow of 1,555 gallons per day. I believe, and Gary will correct me if I'm wrong, that the actual capacity will exceed the design flow as proposed. We actually confirmed the design flow with historic information, water data regarding the prior operations out there. So we're very confident in the design flow being adequate for those uses out there. And since we meet all the requirements, we're asking the board to issue a permit, but I'll have Gary explain the system to you.
Okay, as Mr. Brodsky has indicated, we are proposing a septic system on the site. He did mention some existing tanks that we located on the site. Those are in this location here. Each of the existing tanks is a 4,500 gallon tank. Mr. Grady has inspected those tanks and deemed them watertight and precast concrete, and therefore meeting the requirements of Title V. What we're proposing to do is convert the first one into a grease trap, the second one into a first compartment septic tank, and the third one into a 2-compartment combination septic tank and pump chamber, splitting the 4,500 gallons there into 1,600 additional gallons for the septic tank and 2,900 gallons for the pump chamber. From there, we'll pump it through a 3-inch force main to 2 leaching chamber beds located in this portion of the property. The first, a 110-foot long by 6.5 feet wide leaching chamber bed with 2 rows of 22 pressure-dosed H20 ARC36 high-capacity chambers. And the second, a 55-foot long by 13-foot wide leaching chamber bed with 4 rows of 11 of those same pressure-dosed chambers. There was an existing water service line in this location of the property. We are proposing to relocate that water service so that it's greater than 10 feet to the leaching system as required. We're proposing 10.5 feet. As you can see here, we're proposing 10.1 feet to this property line, 16.8 feet to this property line, 10.6 feet to this property line, 13.1 to this property line, and 10 feet to this property line, and 10 feet to the building. As this demonstrates, there are no setback issues with the soil absorption system. That is the description of the system. That's what we're proposing there. As I said, it's H20 rated. We are proposing vents for each of the systems as required when under vehicular traffic. And we believe that it meets the requirements of Title V.
When was the last time those tanks were used?
Do you guys have more information on that?
They were used for filtrating water to the lobster tank systems. They were actually connected up until a few months back. I changed the design system for the filtration for the lobsters.
Well, when was the last time they were used?
Well, they closed just before construction, so it's less than a year.
Is this the place with the odor?
That's what they left and that one away for.
Right.
The letter of the response.
Okay,
I have copies of the letter that Rick supplied. I can give you copies if anyone needs them.
Oh, good, thank you.
Of course.
We all went round and round on this for quite a while, based on both of us being busy and who had it last and who commented last. We actually lost track of one point. I go, you got it? No, you got it? And then I only had half of it, which is why I was still waiting for something. But then there's two problems here. One, I've been here for over 25 years. There's never been a Board of Health permit in there for any food facility in my 25 years. I'm not saying that the previous lobster operation didn't cook and pick lobster because they have a permit from somebody else to do that. But it's not under us. And I don't know what they possibly do for rating the septic systems for these places under those other rules. But I do know the previous system was a tank and a cesspool. And at the excessive water flow they're talking about, there's no way that would have handled it. I think that they were probably part of the filtration system and not septic tank or waste, typical waste tanks. So I'm looking at this as a new use because, I was thinking warehouse, operation more, is being more fitting, because it was partially wholesale as well as retail. Under new use, there wouldn't be any variances. And just because there are tanks there, they weren't tanks that were previously used as part of the septic system. So you will notice there that neither do they meet the setback under Title V to the building nor to the property line.
And so why don't they need a variance for that? Because they exist.
Well,
claiming
their point is because they're existing tanks. My point is, it's a new operation, they weren't existing septic tanks, and under a new operation, you have to have full compliance, which would mean you would need those setbacks.
Did the tanks need permits when they went in?
I have no idea, because it wasn't underneath.
Well, it wasn't
Before
it wasn't a septic system anyway, so it was just like a shed or a structure that wouldn't need a variance, is that?
It wouldn't be coming to me.
They just went into the ground.
As it was part of the lobster operation. It may have needed something from marine fisheries or somebody that inspected those and issued those kind of licenses. Now, I discussed this with Bart Rowe last week, just to make sure that, you know, I wasn't dreaming. And, you know, I said, you know, as far as I know, it was always a lobster operation. And yes, they do some small food preparation under that other license. But it was never under a health permit.
Or a different format of permit or something. Wasn't it?
So,
Scituate.
you know, and I remember the fire. It happened on one of my birthdays, and I was in tears looking at all those dead lobsters that I had to refill. So, you know, I knew what the septic system was because we weren't going to build over it. So basically, I'm saying it's not a food facility. It's a change in operation, and under a change in operation, you really do need to make full compliance. And you know, that's my problem. And I mean, they're trying to fit more into that space than I think is reasonable. I mean, you know, if they could knock down part of the building and then make more room for their septic system, I think they can have both. But I just don't see it as being in full compliance. I mean, I think there's a way to do it. Like I said, if you've got a little part of some part of the building to get the tanks further in, then I think you can probably do both. But, you know, I just, you know, I'm not comfortable in my gut about it, and I would hate to see it set precedent, because it's like a can of worms, and someone says, well, that's got approved for tanks that didn't used to be septic tanks, you know. You know, so, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with it, and those are the reasons. I mean, I know Steve, I've known him for several operations, I'm fine with that. You know, I'm sure he's run a good operation in Hanover, and he wants to bring that down here, that's fine with me. But I'm just not comfortable with this design.
Based on the fact that it was Scituate that didn't permit it, it was marine fisheries.
Yeah.
So it's a change of
Yeah,
use.
and there's no way that previous system that I knew what it was could have managed that type of volume. I'm sure a lot of the water usage was washing down the inside.
Do you have a copy of the marine fisheries permit that they have?
No.
And whenever it's appropriate, we obviously like the opportunity to speak. We have a very respectful disagreement with Jennifer regarding this. And
Yeah.
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, there's always been a wholesale as well as retail lobster operation there, including cooking. And we provided Jennifer with the documents we found and actually documented the fact that they cook lobsters there.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question of that.
Right.
Jennifer said that, and I think it's the permitting between the state and the town, and that's where the little rub is.
Well, that's where we also disagree. I mean, the lobster operation is regulated by the Marine Fisheries and Food and Drug Administration. Right, it's a federal and state program. You don't require any local board of health approval. Now, if, for example, you know, and we're not proposing this at this time, if indeed there was a restaurant in there, then obviously we would need to comply with all of your local board of health requirements, and we have to get the appropriate licenses and permits. But this is a fully, you know, permitted facility. It's unrelated to Title V, and that's why we're a little bit confused by the connection of the two things. Again, if there's new construction, you'd have to strictly comply with Title V.
What's the confusion? I gotta ask, is it because of the upgrade of the system? I'm not following you there. You said something with a restaurant and,
So like, when I was in Hanover,
yeah.
I'm governed through Division of Marine Fisheries and FDA. I get inspected twice a year, but once I put the kitchen in Hanover, then it became local board of health came in and does their inspections also now. So
I
I'm
got you.
inspected from the local board on that aspect, and then I'm also inspected twice by the Food and Drug Administration for the wholesale retail operations.
So this is it's a regulated activity, but it's regulated by the feds and the state. It's not regulated locally by the board of health.
But the system's being designed for a restaurant, I guess that's the point.
Well, we're not asking for.
Yeah, no, it's being designed to go back to what the capacity was with the cooking of the lobsters and all that stuff.
Gotcha.
It was originally, the original use was as a, I think it was a throughway restaurant, and then I thought it was agreed with Jen that the fast food restaurant was the closest approximation to this kind of operation to come up with an appropriate design flow. And again, no change in use, or we don't think we have to have an argument regarding the application of Title V. But it's an upgrade of an existing system. It's not like it's new construction of an undeveloped lot which requires strict compliance with the requirements of Title V. Again, as I think Rick put in his letter, there's no question we're in the setback, and it's kind of an interesting issue having existing tanks within the setback. And Title V doesn't give you any guidance on that issue. I guess we could theoretically come in and ask for a local upgrade approval if you felt that was appropriate. But again, we're making use of existing tanks. It seemed like the smart thing.
I don't think they were used for subsurface sewage disposal. I think that might be one of the questions you had.
Well, but they meet all the
way I'm
requirements.
interpreting it, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's,
But they I'm not sure that,
they can be
meet all
used
the-
for that.
Right, they meet all the
Right.
technical requirements to be used for these purposes.
That's changing the use, isn't it?
Using the tanks differently, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the use of the building, which I thought was your position, not the change in use. I don't think Title V regulates change of use of tanks. I don't think Title V regulates change of use if you have, appropriate design flow. And you need to report with.
You're looking for a Title V approval one way or the other, right?
Yes, sir.
Either from Jen or from
That's
the Board of
correct.
Health. Okay, and the tanks as previously used were used for what?
Basically lobster waste.
And now you want to use them for lobster waste and as well
No,
as
there's
you,
no more lobster waste.
No more
I changed the
lobster
whole
waste.
filtration design.
just for what?
Grease trap, septic
Sanitary
tank,
sewage.
pump chamber.
Sanitary.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just sanitary use, no longer part of the operation. So that, that to me is a change in use. It's that and it's not going to be a restaurant. Is that right?
Right.
But they're still going to be cooking.
Yes, and that's
Steaming of lobster.
steaming lobsters pursuant to their federal permits.
And the waste from the steaming of the lobsters is going to go through the grease trap.
Yeah.
Which wasn't before because the grease trap was inside.
There was a grease trap inside that was under the sink. So they had a 3-bay sink with a grease trap inside.
So it's certainly not your atypical case, and we recognize that. But we reviewed Title V carefully, and Title V doesn't prohibit doing it this way.
And if we granted this Title V compliance, and it was changed to a restaurant down the road, would they have to come before us?
Well, if they change the use of the system, so to dispose of additional effluent, I guess, from the wet restaurant operation, yeah, right?
No, I mean, if we change to, again, my understanding of Title V doesn't regulate use, that's a zoning issue. Title V, regulates design flow. And so if you had changed the use that required a different design flow, you obviously would have to come to the Board of Health for approval to upgrade the system. But, within changing uses, as long as you provide the appropriate design flow, you meet your design flow.
So the answer is no, you wouldn't have to come before the board.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay,
Again, if
that was
we
the
have a new
question.
restaurant,
Okay.
if you put a restaurant in, we need local Board of Health approval, you need zoning approval, you need all of those other approvals to do that.
Right, so the answer is
I think a restaurant's 1,000 gallons minimum per day.
well, they're 1,500.
For 1,000 gallons, 35 gallons per seat with a minimum of 1,000 gallons per day per restaurant.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting.
It's
As far
it's
as
an
I know,
angle.
We understand, the design not to have a setting precedent. But my understanding is the commercial building across the street, there was a change of use, they got a new septic system. I think the cat's out of the bag, but I don't think this sets any.
That one's neither here nor there. Let's
Right.
just stick with this one.
I don't think you're gonna find, a situation like this that would create any dangerous precedent. It's rare that you ever find, 3 existing tanks that would be suitable for use as part of the septic system.
Yeah, my only, I was just wondering how that works with the marine fisheries, how they look at that. I just wondering how they permit it, that's all.
You want to continue it, and I'll find out?
We'd be happy to provide you with copies of the.
I'm just curious to see how it works, because I mean, like you say, it's an interesting thing, and you've handled it well, and I'm just curious to make sure that things were cooked there, and if it was permitted one way, and I understand where it wasn't with the town, to me, it gives,
I mean, that same thing in Hanover now.
it gives a good thing, but I'd like to just look and see what marine fisheries, how they went about, or how they looked at it, and things were cooked in there, there's no doubt about it.
I can tell you how
No
it works
question.
with that, Russ.
Yeah.
Vision Marine Fisheries now, under the new rules and regs, I just had to build a whole separate cookroom up in
Yeah.
Hanover. As long as you meet the requirements of the, you gotta have your 3-day sink, your hand sink, and, your separate cook area. So as long as
But
you
what
have-
do they look at for the septic?
That's kind of what I'm curious about, to see
They
if,
really don't, to be honest with you. They're more or less, I think they're more or less, they go by, their inspections, you're just gonna meet all their qualifications.
but it'd be an interesting point to discuss with them and see, and, I mean,
So
if you're
with
doing
that-
what the building always did,
Right.
but you're upgrading the system, I mean, it just,
They've got to be deferring to the Board of Health then to make a judgment that the septic system is adequate.
Oh,
If they're not doing
We don't
that,
dispute that, I mean.
then that's what we're doing,
Correct.
right?
Well, that's
So.
why we're trying to make the system adequate.
Yeah, and I don't think, I don't think that's the question, right? You're not saying it's not adequate. If the question really is whether it's such a change of use that we should make you apply for a variance.
Well, there's no change of use, it's the exact,
Well,
what's been there for 25 years is.
Right, and again, that's where, I mean,
You change
again,
the use of the tanks.
well, Title V talks about the uses of the building, the large uses. They don't talk about uses of tanks. The use of the building is as we specified, warehouse, fast food, restaurant, office. I mean, those are right out of the Title V.
Because they're already assuming you are using it for Title V,
Yeah.
for.
Right, and so Title V makes no mention of, use of structures, who used the leaching field, or what was the purpose of it. So there's no question that we're taking existing tanks and making a different use of them, but I don't think that's necessarily, it's not prohibited in Title V, and I don't think that gets to the quote-unquote change of use issue.
let me ask, maybe you said it before, but is the old system on there? Gary, do you have the old system in that plan somewhere? Maybe you could bring that down on the table,
It may be
so we
on
could
the,
take a look at it.
There are 2 sheets also?
Yeah, the second sheet is generally details, but basically what you've got here is an existing septic tank, a D-box, and a leaching field.
Now, were these tanks pumped, or
I don't know anything about the
did
right.
they, were they leached?
I don't know, Rick came out, did measurements, and he was doing all.
When he inspects them, they get pumped. I mean, were you asking were they pumped regularly before, or what?
Well, yeah, because I guess my question is, if this was for human effluent and it flowed, then there's an existing system, and if this leached into the ground too, then it's kind of,
Oh, no, Rick has inspected.
Yeah.
Those are tight tanks.
He
It
said
was
that
self-contained.
tight tanks, the appropriate gauge. I
Right.
mean, he couldn't put his stamp on the plan if it didn't meet those requirements.
right, right.
And wouldn't propose to use
The
it.
question is, where did it reach?
Yeah, did a truck come and pump it to empty them? They had to empty somehow.
Those don't leach, those were actually recirculating tanks, they were filters for the pools inside.
I got you, so they had filters, they'd take out and clean out whatever got in the filters, and the water would go back into
It goes
the,
back
into the tank. Okay, all right, all right, all right.
So there's storage tanks.
gotcha. I think you explained that before, but now it calculates a little better in the head, yeah. Yeah, so now they're tanks that you'll incorporate into the system.
No question, we're, resulting in greater environmental improvement.
Do you think it makes a difference as to whether this change in use of the tanks or just a change in use of the operation? I tend to think he makes a good point that it really is the operation that Title V looks to, and there isn't a change in use in the operation.
That's kind of what I'm,
Well, if they come in and want a health permit
Right.
for,
For a restaurant or
Food.
something, yeah, then they've got to come to you.
and then it's a change in use,
That would be a thing, right?
and it would be an increase in flow,
Right.
and it won't pass,
If they do that.
because a change in use would mean full compliance.
That was kind of my
it's-
question.
And it's not full
Yeah.
compliance.
But they're not doing that.
Yeah.
so
right, they're not doing that at this point. Whether they do it in the future or not do it in the future, it doesn't seem to be our judgment at this time.
You know, as long as they understand that a throughway service is not covered by, without a title, without a food permit.
And this isn't sized for a throughway, that was the original design, it's sized again for fast food. But we understand, if we're gonna put a restaurant in there, we have to go through the whole permit process.
Understand all the boards and all the other stuff.
No, it's interesting, I'm looking at the section 15.203 of Title V, System Sewage Flow Design Criteria. And he says, each component of an on-site surface sewage disposal system shall be designed to treat sanitary sewage discharge from all buildings to be served by the system using the system sewage flow design. And then, when you go to the chart, it talks about, the type of establishment. It's clearly tying use to buildings and the nature of the business used in the buildings.
Does the board have anything, the marine fisheries or anything, or is there a motion? I don't know.
Well, I'd like to just see, and I think we should have a copy of the marine fishery permit on the file. My motion would be to approve the SDS application subject to the submission of the existing marine fisheries permit.
And a local upgrade for the setback?
Yes. And, well, what do you mean, and the local upgrade for the setback?
So they can't, because they don't meet the setback to the building on the property line.
Again, another respectful disagreement.
Go ahead.
Because they're not new tanks, they're existing tanks, we don't think that that triggers local upgrade approval.
But they weren't
under-
used as septic
under
tanks.
Title V.
Yeah, I think that's the question. I guess, Jennifer, I disagree with you on that. I think it's entitled, they're existing structures, albeit they weren't used for this septic system at the time. That's a hard one. I mean, a harder one.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a look at the permit before we even pass a temporary approval. I mean,
Do you guys have a problem of applying for a variance? I suspect it will be granted.
Variance or local upgrade approval?
Yeah, a local upgrade approval, I'm
So
sorry.
it wouldn't be a variance.
Right,
It would be
you're right,
local-
you're right, you're right.
Local upgrade
You're right.
approval. Well, I mean, we obviously like to avoid having to do it, but, it's the board's judgment ultimately.
It's a close call.
They were used for waste, for
But-
filtering, but they weren't part of a,
Right.
it's,
well, I mean, you can use, I guess, there's a, sort of use a zoning analogy, but it's a non-conforming setback issue, if you will. That gets grandfathered, that gets.
right, they're already in.
That gets, if you extend a deck that's already,
It wouldn't make any sense for us to take them out and put them back in.
Week, I think you probably get agreement.
Yeah.
So
So
given that,
then we should, given that, then they should come back.
would this be an appropriate analogy? So you have a room that wasn't a bedroom, and now it's going to be a bedroom, but it doesn't meet the bedroom criteria, but it's okay because it's already there?
I'm not sure if I like the analogy because bedrooms carry with it flow requirements and all
Well,
that.
no, I'm talking about use.
Right. The use isn't changed, it's,
Yeah, the use did change from a non-bedroom to a bedroom.
Yeah, that's the analogy.
Right,
This
but
use
I
here
don't-
hasn't changed of the building.
No,
It's
but the
the
tank changed.
tank changed
yeah,
use, yes,
Tanks changed.
right.
You must have
The
dealt
use
with,
of the tanks changed.
you must have dealt with circumstances where people make reuse of existing components of septic systems when they do an upgrade. And, I mean, do you know, if that existing component is in the setback, do you also require them to come in for a local upgrade approval?
Yeah, but
Well, Gary, can you,
I know that in the past, when we've used existing components, it wasn't even part of the permit. It just, we were only asking for approval of
And you were adding.
new stuff that we were proposing. It never really came up. I can't recall an exact situation where it didn't need a setback. I would be willing to bet that there were instances of that, but I cannot speak with any real
I'm
experience.
assuming that there are instances where there's a D-box or a septic tank that's located in a setback and they're just reusing that and upgrading the leaching field. So,
I'm searching my memory to try and think of anything where we
some of the
did
smaller lots. in
look
Scituate,
one
it must
way
have
or
happened.
the other. I would be surprised if we didn't look at whether everything, whether it pre-existed or whether it was being, new, whether it complied with the setback requirements.
If you approve it, I would feel better if it was local upgrade.
Okay. As I said, that's a close call to me, but to me, the easier solution is, since I don't think you're.
because that's your precedent. If anyone else wanted to do that, they would have to request a local upgrade as opposed to just doing it.
If you want to build one, yeah.
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 You wanna build
If we're
a
gonna
new-
do it, I would
when you're
rather
gonna
do it as a
upgrade
local
build
upgrade
new
as well.
system, we don't disagree with that at all. We just have this unusual circumstance where we're making use of existing structures already in the ground.
And it's a better system, and it's better suited for what
Oh,
you're
it's
doing. I
certainly-
agree with
it's
that, it's just
certainly an
the
upgrade,
technicality of that, and I think
Okay,
that's,
so I'll amend the motion
Mm-hmm.
to say, subject to the filing of the certified copy or whatever, attested to copy of the marine fisheries permit, and to the filing of a application for a local upgrade setback for the tanks.
Would be to the
Which we
building
can
and for the
address
line.
and approve at the next hearing.
Mhm.
That, all other issues, you're good on.
The marine fisheries permit is just gonna say lobster processing on it, they don't give any particular details or anything, but.
We can give you the regulations if you want. to
That's
see
fine,
the
yeah.
regulations.
that would, exactly, if we could have that,
That would be great.
maybe midweek before our next meeting. That way we'd have a little time to digest it.
I'll be able to get the plan and the paperwork to you by Monday as well.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, maybe get you on for the next 2 weeks. All right, so there's a motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, guys.
I think you're probably beyond. Maybe about 740 on the 17th.
It'll be posted on the agenda anyways, right?
Oh, yeah,
We'll just check, it's online, We'll check it.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good luck with the new operation.
Thanks.
7:25 PM condemnation hearing, 12 Whortleberry Road. Miss Veronica Charbonneau.
Vicki called me and she had her other eye operated on today, doctor set the date. I told her I didn't know what was gonna happen, but that she would definitely be on the next meeting agenda. I indicated in my letter for the hearing that, that the board showed some indication that, the order may not be, enforced if she kept up with the cleaning schedule.
What would we do in a case if somebody became incapacitated? Or in the same case, in the same scenario, rather than just a operation, if somebody became incapacitated to some degree, whether it be,
Well, I've had I've been involved in a couple of cases where a family member has asked to appoint a guardian, and I was asked to give testimony why I thought that would be a good idea. That I didn't think the person was capable of properly taking care of themselves.
that's kind of what we're driving at.
You would have to talk to possibly the police chief about the pink slip procedure, because I'm not that familiar with the reason for that. Otherwise, we could take her to court on these problems and then ask the court to do an evaluation.
So the process then.
Oh, yeah, it's not a slam dunk on any means.
Has there been any communication with her since the last meeting? Has it been?
No, yeah, she called to say she couldn't make this meeting.
Right, but that was it with,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, she said she was keeping cleaning, but,
Any contact from the niece?
well, I think the niece has still been there, but she hasn't, I gave her my card, but she hasn't called me, so. You know, I'm sure that, you know, Vicki told her what happened at the last meeting, I'm pretty sure, but,
is she staying at the house after this operation, I wonder? Do we know? I don't know how, how it is with the eye.
I imagine she is, because it's her house.
Yeah, she wouldn't be staying with any relatives for a little while or anything.
Her nearest relatives are in Albany.
In Albany, right.
You know, it's unfortunate on many levels, but, and that makes it even more difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the niece.
And she was making progress up until the operation, we know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the niece wants to do the right thing for her, but how much Ms. Charbonneau will allow is questionable.
So do you think you can get access to give us some current photographs and things before the next hearing? Okay.
Yeah.
Then why don't we just
Table it.
table it until the
Continue
next
it
one?
till-
But I think you, at least from me, should communicate to her that, okay, more time has been granted to you as a result of the gratuity of these medical procedures, and so we expect that there will be a concomitant progress in the cleanup. And if what we're looking at, you know, is progress which would make it look like it will take another 2 years to complete the work to, you know, any reasonable degree of safety, that's not going to be acceptable to the board.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, I mean, what I was mulling over in my mind as a time schedule is to, you know, break it up in pieces and to say, okay, you've got a month to clean up the living room. And then I'd give her another month to clean up the hallways and the breezeway. And then I'd give her another month to do a couple of the other rooms.
Sounds like a lot of shifting around. Oh, boy.
But the thing is, you know, if she sees it as maybe attainable, then maybe she'll do it.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
I mean, rather, by breaking it up in bits.
Right. Give goals set and they're reasonable goals
We'll
too.
leave that to you
Yeah.
to communicate,
Yeah.
but I think,
As long as forward progress is
I
being made.
obviously, I had hoped that the ground I made before would have been maintained and we wouldn't be talking about it, but that didn't happen, so.
I'm very suspicious this is
I,
going to be a big shock.
You know, I'm not helpful, but, you know,
Alright.
that's,
Benefit of
this
the
is the
doubt.
last ditch as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Okay, so,
Move to continue, I think we phrased it as a show cause or something like that the last time, to the next hearing on the 17th.
Second.
all those in favor? Aye.
It's in second.
We did?
I did.
Yeah. It was subtle, but I heard it.
You can buy one, I can.
Okay.
Good, Mary? You're on it, you got it. All right, we'll move right along. 7:45 PM, water fluoridation discussion. Dr. John P. Fisher, DDS. Past President, Mass Dental Society, member of Board of Directors for the Better Oral Health Coalition of Massachusetts. All right, I guess we'll, we have, I think it's been about a month and a half now. We've had some discussion.
This is Fitzgerald.
Ms. Fitzgerald came in with looking at maybe removing fluoridation from our water system, and she brought in some great evidence to the fact to have it removed. And Dr. Parsons came in and discussed reasons not to have it removed. And being a representative from the state, I think this was the last one we kind of wanted to have part of the debate. So I give you the floor,
And
please.
thank you for coming.
And thank you, yeah.
Well, per se, I'm not part of the state, you know,
Right.
I'm part of the, you know, Better Oral Health Massachusetts Coalition. I probably am the only one on the coalition that doesn't have a master's in public health. I'm a practicing dentist in Salem, Massachusetts. And as you mentioned, I'm the past president of Mass Dental Society. You know, I serve on a council of the American Dental Association called the Council on Access, Prevention, and Interprofessional Relations. I serve on that same council of the Massachusetts Dental Society. Really what that council has to do is with, you know, access, you know, the underserved, trying to get more people really to sign up for mass health prevention. We, you know, encourage and promote different school-based programs. You know, we support fluoride as you know, for community water supplies in, you know, in the appropriate amount. Obviously, we're looking for what the optimal level is. You know, I think everybody wants to do the right thing for the right reason, but I think it's not always real obvious what the right reason is. When I first came to Massachusetts in 1974, I was relatively young. I went to Temple University for dental school, and I graduated in 1972. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, 3,500 people. You know, Scituate's not as small as the town I grew up in. And you know, as I came up here, it never struck me that there were areas that were not fluoridated. I mean, it just I went to school at Temple University. We literally, even though it's a city, you know, inner city school, had trouble finding kids with enough decay to meet our requirements for restorative for you know, pediatric dentistry. So when I first came to Salem, I saw kids from Salem, I saw kids from Beverly, and the water supply was fluoridated. I saw kids from Marblehead, Swampscott, and you know, relatively upscale communities from my perspective, and kids had just outrageous decay. And one of the things that you know, I mean, I rather naively assumed it was poor parenting. Then I found out that there was no fluoride in the water supply. The MWRA was the water supply for Marblehead, Swampscott, Lynn. And I mean, I saw kids with so much decay that I was not prepared to treat. I had to refer the kids to pediatric dentists. They literally had to put them in hospitals and treat them under sedation to take care of the amount of decay that I saw in some cases. And I just, you know, I really could not believe it. But, you know, as they, I think it was 1978 or thereabouts that they fluoridated the water for the MWRA, which, you know, came through Marblehead and Swampscott. And at that point, I saw a tremendous decrease in the amount of decay. And, you know, it's not like they don't have decay. I mean, they're still gonna, kids are still gonna get decay, adults are gonna get decay.
But, you know, people who actually take advantage of the, you know, the quality, the quality water supply that they have in their community water, you know, if it's fluoridated, I think you see a tremendous decrease in the amount of decay, and that's what I saw over the years, you know, practicing in Salem. I've been there 39 years now, and, you know, fluoride, I'm sure somebody, you know, if, colleague has already talked about this, he probably gave you the history of fluoride. In the 1920s and 30s, in naturally fluoridated areas in the West, Colorado, New Mexico, areas like that, where they have a lot of fluoride in the water. Unfortunately, it's like levels of 4 parts per million, which is somewhat significant, you know, much higher than the recommended level by, you know, for the water supply. You know, the recommended level has been for years 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million, and you know, that's been revised recently. But they found out by accident that you know, people who lived in fluoridated areas, they had less decay. When I was in the military, I mean, it was obvious when we saw kids that, you know, young recruits who came in without any cavities. I mean, you asked them where they were from, and you expected them to tell you they were someplace out west where the water, you know, was fluoridated. But 1936, they determined that 1 part per million was the optimal level. In 1945, I think Grand Rapids, Michigan was the first city to adjust their level of fluoride in the water supply. You know, they added fluoride to it. And Newburgh, New York, I think was second. There were a couple of other cities then. But since then, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they've proclaimed community water fluoridation as one of the great public health achievements of the 20th century. You know, fluoridation is the adjustment of existing naturally occurring fluoride levels in drinking water. And that's, you know, there's fluoride in the ocean, there's fluoride in well water. You know, I've heard the argument, well, I moved from a fluoridated area and bought a farm and I had a well, I still didn't get cavities. Well, the odds are good they had, you know, an optimal level or even a greater than optimal level of fluoride in their well water. That's, you know, it's adjusting the level of fluoride up or down. I mean, in areas where it's too high, you have to adjust it down to an acceptable level. So you have to deliver it to take some of the fluoride out of the water. But that's the current recommendation by the U.S. Public Health Service, based on a study that they did in 2010 at 0.7 parts per million. And that's, you know, it's a little bit like herding cats to decide how much fluoride to put in the water. Because, you know, it's not an exact science by any means. There's a range of what they have. And to a degree, you have to trust your local water supply people to be controlling it. I think, you know, one of my jobs when I was in school was as a lifeguard or, you know, pool manager. And, you know, one of my pride, you know, one of the things I took pride in was making sure my chlorine was always at a good level and, you know, it wasn't too high and caused burning of the eyes and, you know, skin irritation, everything else that you can get if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. And you have to rely on your water supply people to do the same kind of thing. I think in 2002, they decided that approximately 170 million people, which is 2/3 of the U.S. population, are served by public water systems that are fluoridated. And I think in Massachusetts, it's 4 million people, which again is about the same thing, 63% of the population. I know Scituate's been fluoridated since 1954. I'm sure you know this, but the authority to fluoridate or not to fluoridate rests with the Board of Health. It's not the selectmen, it's not a vote of the population, it's the Board of Health that makes the decision as to whether or not there should be fluoride in the water. So that's sort of a big responsibility that you guys carry, but what that is. The World Health Organization initially recommended the practice of water fluoridation in 1969. They reaffirmed its support in 1994, stating water fluoridation is the most effective method of reaching the whole population so that all social classes benefit without the need for participation on the part of individuals. You know, there was a
a study done in California relative to healthcare disparities. And one of the things they decided was one of the things that eliminates some of the healthcare disparities are fluoride in the water, because everybody gets the advantage of that. You know, there's no socioeconomic discrimination, and it's the poor and the underserved who seem, you know, really need it more than others. How fluoride works to prevent decay. Again, you probably already heard this, but it's like when the teeth are forming, fluoride gets incorporated into the enamel. If you have optimal levels of fluoride in the water, as kids grow older, they start to get decay. Fluoride in the water helps to remineralize the tooth, and fluoride also helps fight. It lessens the amount of bacteria or it lessens the amount of acid that bacteria create. So, three things that help in decreasing. I'm going to give you some papers I have here, and they have a study that so on the effects of pre and post eruption water fluoride on decay experienced by surface life. But that just means that it works, for kids in pre and post thing. There's another study here preventing decay in adults, and it's just the effectiveness of fluoride in preventing caries decay in adults. That's a Journal of Restorative Dentistry, and that's 2007. Again, fluoridation reduces disparities. That's a California study I have for you. Fluoride safe for the environment. There's this 2006 study at the University of Michigan. They found no negative effects on the environment, no negative effect on health of plants, animals, humans, no effect on corrosion of pipes, no measurable increase in lead or arsenic, no measurable increase in fluoride in rivers, streams, groundwater, no release of toxins or hazardous substances. And that's water fluoridation in the environment, current perspectives in the U.S. That's the International Journal of Occupational Environmental Health, 2004. But I'll give you a copy of this. The U.S. Surgeon General recently, Regina Benjamin, MD, April 22nd, she officially endorsed community water fluoridation as one of the most effective choices communities can make to prevent health problems while actually improving the oral health of their citizens. There's been some questions, I forget whether I read it in the Scituate News article, just as a general thing, but relative to the effect of fluoride on IQ. The studies that that have done that say that there's a negative effect on IQ have been done in China, India, and Mexico. There are no studies in the United States that show that optimal levels of fluoridation have any effect on IQ. The ones that were done in China, they didn't even establish what the concentration of fluoride was in the water in most of the studies. In the studies that showed negative effects that they did establish the concentrations, it was 11 parts per million, which is 4 times the maximum level that the EPA allows for fluoride in water, which is 2 parts per million. The EPA actually allows it to 4 parts per million before they designate it as a contaminated water system. But so 11 parts per million is way out of whack. I mean, it exists even in the United States at levels of 11 parts per million in the actual water supplies. But in those communities, they have to take fluoride out of the water. So,
Excuse me.
but anyway, also the studies didn't take into account other variables such as the presence of lead or arsenic in the water or other dietary deficiencies. As to fluoride in cancer, osteosarcoma, there are no credible scientific studies that show any relationship. I also have a list for you of organizations that recognize the public health benefits of community water fluoridation. The American Cancer Society is one of them. They would not be endorsing water fluoridation if in fact they thought that it caused cancer. Fluoride and kidney disease. 2008, the National Kidney Foundation issued a statement: there is insufficient evidence at this time to recommend the use of fluoride-free drinking water for patients with renal disease. You know, I think the confusion there has to do with they have to have deionized water. So if it has fluoride in it, it has to be a deionized, fluoride ion. So that's maybe why that particular concern has arisen. I really don't quite know. Community water fluoridation ban in Europe is, a rumor that I have heard. Again, there's no country in Europe that has banned community water fluoridation. In Europe, they let each country make their own decision, and not just the country, but regions of the country make their own decision. In parts of Europe, they use fluoride in the salt or in milk as an alternative, source of fluoride, to supplement fluoride in the diet. And of course, even in Europe, they have fluoride naturally occurring in water supply too. As far as I know, I read this one in the Scituate, article about fluoride as a rat poison. I think fluoride, may have been used at one time as a rat poison, but the most popular rat poison, and again, I know a lot of our rats come from the farm country that I came from, was warfarin. And warfarin, you're probably familiar with that as Coumadin. And Coumadin is prescribed for millions of people as an anticoagulant to prevent stroke, thrombopulmonary embolism, and heart attacks. So again, it's not whether or not you're using something for a certain purpose. It's how much you're using it and whether or not it's regular. It's regulated. A second, rat poison is a calciferol. Rats are clever creatures, and if they start to eat something, they get a little sick. They don't keep eating it. So calciferols are really vitamin D, and if they eat too much of it, vitamin D is a poison. Calcium is a poison. The only rat poison I know, well, actually there's two: sodium fluoroacetate and fluoroacetamide. Fluoroacetamide, they just switch out a fluoride ion for a hydrogen ion. So again, you still have hydrogen, you still have carbon, you still have oxygen in fluoroacetamide. So you're sort of condemning all of those if you're condemning fluoride as a rat poison. Aluminum, calcium, magnesium, zinc phosphide, all rat poisons, but you certainly need zinc in your diet, you need magnesium, you need all that stuff. Let's see. The major cause of fluorosis in children, fluorosis is, in its mildest forms, you can't even tell that there's fluorosis. I mean, as a dentist, I don't think I've seen fluorosis. I don't think I've ever seen fluorosis in my practice in Salem. I think I saw fluorosis a couple of times. I was in the Army Reserves for 26 years after active duty, and I was all over the country for my 2 weeks. When I was in Texas, I was all over the place. I have seen cases of fluorosis, but they're generally in areas where the parts per million exceed 2 parts per million of fluoride in the water supply. And some of the fluorosis that I saw was, with young recruits again that came in parts of the country, had well water, totally unregulated water supplies. So, but even that, I think, I had 2 daughters. Both my daughters lived in Marblehead when they were bringing fluoride into the water. My daughters were on fluoride supplements, and I know they were getting more fluoride at the time because it wasn't well publicized when they first introduced fluoride into the water supply. And they're 40 and 36 years old, and they still don't have any cannabis. I would rather see more fluoride than less fluoride personally, but that's not really, it's just my own personal little preference. The communities of Duxbury, Lincoln, Longmeadow, and Templeton have recently dealt with the fluoride issue, and they all voted to keep fluoride in the water. Dr. Brumley, who's chair of the Board of Health in Duxbury, not too far away, he might be someone you'd want to call and talk to if you had any more questions. fluoride, well, any disease entity, and, you know, make no mistake about it, dental decay is a disease. It can be dealt with in two ways. You can develop newer, better, more costly treatment modalities, or you can work harder to prevent it or eradicate it. I belong to the Rotary Club in Salem. One of our worldwide initiatives is to eliminate polio, and, you know, we're almost there. But malaria continues as a serious threat in many parts of the world, and millions of children still go to sleep with a toothache, you know, crying silently at night. And I think that's really sort of a terrible thing myself. So dental decay is totally preventable. We really don't do enough as a society to prevent it. And again, it's the poor and the underserved who suffer the most in communities where there's no fluoride. And the financial cost to treat these children is significantly greater than the cost of fluoridation. My wife and I used to volunteer on a mobile dental van and in an unfluoridated area. And until I did that, I had forgotten how bad the decay could be. And you know, we had a little girl that came in one time. She was 12 years old. Her mother couldn't be there. Her face was swollen with poison ivy, and yet she still came in. And the reason she came in, we had helped her the year before, and she had her little sister with her who was afraid of the dentist and had never been to the dentist actually. And she came in to hold her little sister's hand while we treated her. And my wife and I saw a lot of this when we were, you know, volunteering on this dental van. And this little kid, I mean, a number of the teeth, we couldn't do much except take the teeth out. That's, I mean, it was, you couldn't put a filling in, there was nothing there to fill. And that was an unfluoridated area. So, you know, I think I'm totally in support of fluoride myself. And, you know, I guess I have to ask you, have any other questions other than what I've just told you?
I think the study is great.
It's a lot that reinforces what we've heard, I think, unless there's a question from...
Yeah, I'd love to read the studies that you've got.
This is just-
I don't want to read everything.
Yeah, I don't want to go through and give you all this either. This is like just all the things. I mean, Alzheimer's is another one. There's been rumors that Alzheimer's Association, they support fluoridation. You know, Health Education, Cancer Society, Preventive Medicine, I mean, American Medical Association. This is a letter from, you know, Dr. Lukian usually does these presentations. I've never really been before board before.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. And he got a letter from the Dean, Jeffrey Flyer. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at Harvard. Bruce Donoff is the Dean of the School of Dental Medicine. And Julio Frank, he's the Dean of the Faculty School of Public Health. So he wrote a letter, you know, in support of...
And all signed.
Yeah. This is something that has all the studies. It's actually something that's not as easy to read on this. I've got it. You know, I can send you a thing, you know, through an email if you want.
Yeah, you send that to Jennifer.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll get it to
Okay.
them.
And this actually is just as good. This is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They literally go through and what is fluoride, you know, questions about fluoride. This is their website. The American Dental Association has a website, Fluoride Facts, and you know, they have a lot of material on there. I would have copied that, I would have downloaded and copied that for you, but it's proprietary.
Gotcha. All right, we can find it. You mentioned the fluorosis. Do you have a sense as to how much fluoride you need?
It's greater than 2 parts per million is what they say. You know, that's the study seemed to indicate. Greater than 2 parts per million, there's a potential for fluoride. But even then, fluorosis. But even then, it tends to be mild fluorosis, which, you know, it's like you might get little white striations on the teeth. You know, fluorosis actually, even if it does occur in areas where there's, you know, heavy concentrations, it does bleach out. It takes a long time to bleach it, but you can actually bleach, you know, the discoloration.
It is correct. It is correctable without
Correctable, yeah.
without invasive procedure.
And I guess the question I have is it's But it's probably obvious to a qualified dentist that you've got fluorosis.
Not really, I mean, that's
No?
the biggest thing. I mean, unless you're up in like, I mean, you have to have a pretty significant, fluorosis to pick it up.
Okay.
I mean, quite honestly, if you know, nowadays, everybody's into bleaching teeth and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, it's the kind of thing that until we started bleaching teeth, people with yellow teeth or, dark brown teeth, just stain that you pick up from coffee and tea, looked a lot worse than any fluorosis that you'd ever see.
Gotcha.
I mean, most people that have fluorosis, when you tell them it's fluorosis, they're like, is that a bad thing? But it's like, I think we tell them just, truth in lending type of stuff. You tell them everything that you do, that you see when you do an exam. But I've never had anybody with mild fluorosis who in any way, shape, or form felt that they needed to address it as a problem.
I guess I'm just wondering what the signs, would be if there is
Well,
over-fluoridation, which seems to be.
You'll see first, like, you'll see like mild, white striations. I mean, it goes all the way up to where you have brown and mild teeth, but I mean, that's in areas where you've got 4 parts per million. But, again, it's a minor cosmetic, thing. It's so minor that.
Another DPW would have to put that much in, and they would have to increase their budget, and they wouldn't.
Well, it's not even, in most cases of fluorosis are kids eating toothpaste. That's it, pure.
Okay.
It's pure, not.
Overdosing on the
Parents
toothpaste.
not paying attention.
Yeah.
They just come out with new recommendations. It's like for 6 months, you don't brush your kids' teeth with any toothpaste. 6 months to 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, I'm sorry. It's a smear, on the toothbrush.
Right.
And you're using a small toothbrush. 3 years to 6 years, it's a pea-sized, dab of fluoride toothpaste, and to 16 is whatever fluoride you want to put. Interesting enough, you get some kids just like to eat toothpaste, and they will do it. It's one of the reasons that they made the toothpaste companies put the label warning on it saying, you need careful supervision, because, they.
Stupid question, is there any toothpaste that does not have fluoride in it?
Oh, yeah. Tom's Maine has some.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't have fluoride in it. I think there are a few other toothpastes. There's a lot of natural. There are, natural toothpastes that have fluoride and don't have fluoride. And the basis for that is, fluoride is still naturally occurring. So they sell it both ways, even though it's natural, toothpaste type of thing. Tom's also sell, they sell it with and without fluoride.
That's all the questions I had.
No, it's reinforced a lot of things I've
I
read.
appreciate your coming all the way from Salem in particular. I've been doing that drive recently. Down to Scituate is not a good drive.
Well, it's not bad early in the morning. I hope it's not bad late.
You
Nah,
should be
you'll be
okay.
fine.
You
Yeah,
should
you'll
be
be good.
okay now, but it can be tough.
Yeah.
This is great information, I think it's really great.
All right. Most of what I gave you,
hold on one sec.
is-
Yeah.
it's like you can, you can pretty much get it out of those websites.
Well, thank you. Mr. Jones, you,
I did have a question.
oh, sure, yeah, absolutely.
I
And
do have a question. You talked about naturally occurring fluoride.
just for the, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, just for the, for
Yep.
the secretary, maybe.
Cheryl Radley Fitzgerald, 84 Brook Hill Road, Situate.
Thank you.
You spoke about naturally occurring fluorides. Can you tell me the difference between, if there is a difference between that naturally occurring fluoride and what we put in our water?
Well, what we put in our water is fluorosilicic acid, fluorosalicylate, I think it is, sodium fluorosilicic acid, and sodium fluoride. And really, what occurs most naturally most of the time is the sodium fluoride. And that's what they actually add with, salt. But they've done studies on all three of them. The Michigan study that I referred to, I think it was 2006. They studied the breakdown, how those materials dissolve in the water and how it breaks down into the fluoride occurring, at the 1 part per million level. So, they found that there are no problems because of that. I mentioned there's no pipe corrosion, there's no lead and arsenic. Again, you have to read that Michigan study, but
So in other words, what naturally occurs is sodium fluoride.
well, sodium fluorosilicate and fluorosilicic acid, they also occur naturally.
Okay, so that, like in,
Yeah.
you were talking about in the western part of the U.S., how you said that, there were some instances where their water sources contained elevated levels of
Right.
fluoride, so that would be actually a naturally occurring sodium
Yeah,
fluoride.
and in those cases where it's too high, you think of it as a contaminated water supply, because it is too high. It's not so high that it's gonna kill you. I mean, literally, in China, they have it in, 11 parts per million in local water supplies, and people are drinking it, they seem to get along just fine. But, they also will have, brown pitted teeth.
So, well, what is calcium fluoride then?
Calcium fluoride is just another substance that's not used, to add fluoride.
So calcium fluoride is just another, is that a synthetic?
Well,
Is that
it'd be like fluorocetamide, it's another compound that has fluoride in it.
In other words, is there a difference between the calcium fluoride and the sodium fluoride?
Well,
Or-
it's a different compound.
Okay, but have we looked at either or as far as that being?
Whether you use one over the other? Well, the three that are recommended to fluoridated water supply are the three that I mentioned. Okay? So,
Okay.
in terms of, what's your advantage to use calcium fluoride? I don't know of any personally.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Mr. Joe, do you have anything else to add? I'd give you a minute or two if you want to add something or.
Other than I had run across a couple of, they're really hefty, and I don't know if, again, this is something that you were looking to vote on or whatever, but just some, again, another sort of a little easier format for questions and answers, and a study that was done by a dentist in Australia.
My suggestion would be if you've got any more studies, add them to what has been submitted tonight.
Okay.
Jennifer
Sure.
will get them to us. We're reading them all, I'm sure.
Other than,
Is this something you guys for a motion or?
I would move or request, I'm not sure which is appropriate here, that we put this on for a vote on the next hearing as to whether the Board of Health finds that any action needs to be taken with respect to the level of fluoride in the water in the town of Scituate, and also to consider whether we should or should not make a recommendation to town meeting. The town meeting actually who voted this in 50-something years ago.
The law changed in 1968, so it's like
What law was that? We had discussion about this now. What do you mean that it's moot, Jennifer?
I'm not sure which law.
No,
Well,
it's
I
to-
think- I
it's to
think
Jennifer.
what I think the town voted it in '54,
Yeah.
and I think the authority to approve or not approve changed in
What, okay, when it came under the Board of Health.
68. So now that it's, I guess it's a vote of the Board of Health as opposed to town meeting.
Okay, then I'll retract that other part. I mean, I think the town meeting could probably still take some action to take it out, I suppose.
Well, you could propose an article to affirm if you
Okay, so,
wanted.
no, so all I'm gonna say is as part of the motion, in addition in addition to determining whether we should take any action as the Board of Health, that at the next meeting, we also should discuss whether or not we should make any recommendation at all to town meeting. I'm not saying right now whether we should or we shouldn't, but I think that the issue was raised. It may be raised by others at town meeting, so at least the town meeting should, or may want to hear from the Board of Health, and so we should have a position on it. That's my motion.
So you have that stuff, you can bring it up and present it to the board. Dr. Parsons, do you have anything to add, please? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, actually.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reiterate a little bit and expand a little bit on what Dr. Fisher said, and that is, last time I talked about the risks and versus the benefit, and I just wanted to, the benefit has been well established. But looking at the cost benefit, I think is important. I wanted to bring that out. And that is, by having children between the ages of 0 and 12 have fluoride, you are conferring almost a lifelong immunity, a lifelong protection against duplicate. That's a lifetime of less stones, a lifetime of less dental visits, a lifetime of fewer extractions, crowns. It's not only the cost of dental treatment, it's the less time away from work. I mean, the cost of dental treatment is very high. And for maybe $1 a day, $1 a year per child, so maybe $12 for a child from 0 to 12, for $12 versus the other side, which is a lifetime of less dental treatment, and less loss. I mean, that's enormously different. So, I mean, you would be consigning the future children of Scituate to much, to much more dental treatment, much more cost of dental treatment. So I think you need to consider that. That was basically, I mean, I think if you look at the quality of the evidence in favor of fluoride versus the quality of evidence against fluoride, I think there's no difference. I think we'll really see that. And then so I just want to bring out, what the cost and one stuff, just to reiterate, just to, in support of the study. So
Okay, all right.
Just one more question.
Question to Dr. Parsons?
Yes.
Sure, all right, please.
You
What's
don't
that?
need to stand up.
No, you don't need to stand up. No.
Just a quick question as
Yeah.
far as the fluoride applied topically
Yeah.
as opposed to drinking it. Do you have an opinion? Is there
I think topical fluoride is,
As you're drinking it is in the formative years, so that's pre-eruptive. So ingesting it allows it to be incorporated into the tooth structure while the tooth is developing. Once the teeth are in the mouth, the topical application is important in terms of, reinforcing or remineralizing the outer surface. You'll see, like, kids sometimes when they've had braces, if they haven't been careful about how they're brushing when they've got their braces on, when braces first come off, they've got some demineralization, so they'll have white spots and stuff like that. So a lot of, that surface breakdown that you get just from the acid produced by bacteria, you get remineralization from the topical fluoride, from fluoride rinses, from brushing with fluoride toothpaste. That's the reason that the U.S. Department of Public Health has reassessed their recommendation to have it at 0.7 parts per million versus the range that they had before, which was 0.7 to 1.2. The reason they had 0.7 to 1.2 was they figured, well, it's hotter down south and they're going to drink more water. So you go 0.7 down there because they're drinking more water and getting more fluoride. In the north, they figure, well, it's not as hot, you're not drinking as much, so maybe up here we'd have it, slightly heavier, like 1 part per million. But as I said before, it's like it's like chasing rainbows or herding cats. It's like some kids are going to be a little higher in the range, some are going to be a little bit lower. The great thing about that is fluoride, as my colleague has stated, it reinforces the strength of the teeth for a lifetime. And, you know, there's one of those studies in there, you know, shows that with older adults, and again, you know, part of what I look at when you know, my concern is kids and the elderly. You know, the elderly, over 65, that part of our population is tremendously ignored. But in fact, the elderly also have a great advantage from having fluoride in the water, because as you get older, you get some recession, and the roots are exposed. And the roots are softer and more prone to decay. But that topical, you know, the topical application of fluoride, if you will, in the water, in fact, helps that decay to remineralize and decreases the financial burden on the elderly in terms of their need for dental care. So I look at it, you know, the council that I serve on access prevention and interprofessional relations. I mean, we have a big push on to, you know, collaborate more with physicians. And again, that has to do with helping physicians. You know, physicians in Massachusetts now are allowed to apply fluoride varnish on kids. You know, we'd like to encourage that and encourage it with the elderly. And just for that reason, that, you know, prevention, you know, the whole thing, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of whatever. You know. That's what we're suddenly realizing is the real significance, you know, in terms of dental care, is preventing the disease, not treating the disease. I mean, we're pretty solid on how to treat the disease. We'd like to prevent it.
Just one other thing. Fluoride in the water, if taken by small children, infuses the entire tooth from the surface to the subsurface, whereas topical application of fluoride just affects the outer layers. And it's great. I mean, you put a very strong fluoride in, it gets incorporated, it makes that outer layer super hard, and that's why we do it. But it doesn't go through the entire tooth, it's just the surface. So it doesn't, better to have both. And B, you know, top application fluoride is good for kids who are able to have regular visits, but as Dr. Fisher said, fluoride in water is great for kids who are poor, don't have access to care. It helps everybody. It costs them nothing. So, you know, the kid who gets early and often to the dentist, yeah, with topical fluoride, that's great. They are protected, but it doesn't help everybody. And the dosages, we also talked about the dose. 1 part per million in the water, it's 5,000 parts. So it's very high in topical fluoride. And so they adjust. You know, they get 1 pound dose. You know, that day they get a big bunch of fluoride, but most of it passes through, and there's no evidence of harm. Certainly 1 part per million is not going to harm anybody in the water. Does that answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Between
get your
the two
opinion
of us.
while you guys were here.
Yeah, good.
That's good, because we're all good, and I can't thank you guys enough for everybody sharing their information. Perfect.
So I would second that about the vote.
Pardon me?
Put to a vote for next meeting.
Next meeting, right?
Yeah, okay.
All right, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go. Next meeting.
We can do the agenda tomorrow.
Close it off.
We'll look at everything, and again, thank you guys, and
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Really
Wesley.
Nice talking to you. Nice meeting you.
Pleasure.
Thank you
Pleasure.
so
If you're ever
much.
up in Marblehead, stop in at Maddie's. Give me a call.
All right, new business, temporary tight tank, Central Ave.
Okay. This has come up from the storm Title Fives we had done in Homerock and Graves, and what happened in one of the cases is a family from Canada bought one of the houses and was rehabbing it. The storm came and then kibosh the system. So, of course, they were hoping to use it this summer. And because it's probably going to be some kind of a tight tank, it may involve an extra room on the house because it's elevated for, you know, the type of system we've done in a few other houses. If there's no way they can get it all through the process and built
What did
be
that-
able to use the house in the summer.
What'd the house have for a system before?
We don't want these houses where it washed away, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I forget.
But this was up on Pounds. I think I know the house. 'Cause somebody had some major work down there. That was,
Yeah.
they had to redo all the beams, but I mean, did it have a tank in it? Can they seal up the existing tank as a tight tank?
I think it was a pit, and it just crumbled.
So it must have, that thing was so rotted, it was probably 78 when it went stilts. Okay.
So, they've asked conservation. Conservation is sort of okay with it, depending on what Board of Health and DEP says. I've talked to Brett Rowe at DEP, and he says if they wanted to put in a concrete septic tank and treat it as a tight tank until they get something else in there, they would not be opposed. They wouldn't be opposed to it. But at this point, tight tank approvals are pretty much local, because they're giving back everything they took, most of what they took away before, because they're losing people. So, I didn't want to speak for the board, and so I'm putting this by you. I mean, if we make a environmentally safe disposal needs that they could put in for the summer, would you have a problem with that?
No, as long as it was restricted,
Well, we
Yeah,
could
there
give
was a
them,
timetable.
we give, you can use it for the summer,
Yeah.
and then the next summer, you've had enough time, you should be able to get the other thing done.
Will it have the alarm and things on it, so when it gets so
Oh,
full?
yeah, it has to.
It has to, okay. Yeah.
I would put it in without it.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm just asking.
But that's asking for trouble.
No.
And when you going back in the house, it's coming out on the ground.
Well, that's kind of, education of people.
Yeah. So, and then we have another one. That came in after that. I just talked to Brett about today. And basically, it's an elevated house. Septic tank's okay, but the leaching was destroyed. So they're redoing the leaching. But the question is, because it's an elevated house in the V zone, what do you do about the tank? And he says, well, basically, the law says feasible, and I guess feasible is a interpretive word. And,
how old's the tank?
the tank's been checked, and that tank's okay. But, I mean, he said, it's one, you could either look at it as a component repair,
Well, yeah.
or it's possible, because given the size of the already existing house, that they can't put it up there, because they don't have the room, setbacks, space, and everything. And therefore, we would just, do the leaching and leave the tank.
To me, if the tank survives, I mean, if it gets destroyed and moved, then maybe you gotta make them upgrade. But if the tank survived, then it survived. Let it live.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was, and Brett was pretty much okay with that.
It's the evil we have to deal with. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
So if you're okay with the temporary part, then I can convey that to Concom, and they can, the engineer's ready to go.
Yeah.
So they can get it in and we can get it dealt with.
I think we want to encourage people to do the right thing rather than have them
Yeah, penalize for something.
do the wrong thing
Mhm.
and get,
Mhm.
because.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
just that you have to, there's more than us involved here, and you just don't want to, you want, a level playing field, everybody on the same page, so that's why I'm running it by you guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but there should be a time limit on that. I mean, I think Russell's correct about that, that you just can't all of a sudden stick one in and then,
Well, no, because,
yeah.
the thing is they've done enough work on there, I think they're gonna have to get an occupancy permit, and I can arrange it with the building department and get a temporary occupancy permit. So,
Well, you say that if they're looking at it for the summer, I mean, they got their engineering and all their other stuff they gotta do, and as you said, time limit, I mean, we did this before with a house till October, and that was it, you lose your occupancy permit until you get your system, and I think we used Columbus weekend as the official, kinda unofficial end of summer. It is in my mind, runs from Memorial Day to Columbus weekend, so.
yeah, that's fine with me.
Long as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's too cold.
Yeah, and then if they don't do something, then
You
shame
know,
on
if they
them.
survive the storms for the next few months, they'll be doing good. All right, that's good, I just wanted to clear that with you guys.
Any invoices, Mary? That was
No, I'm really basically all set. I had one for Nellie, but there was enough money left on the purchase order the three of you had signed already. I may have a few more that are waiting for approval, but nothing that's
Okay.
final.
It was on the agenda here, so
Right.
I figured I'd ask. So we're good till the next meeting, Monday, June 17th, 2013? I guess
Sure, busy meeting.
we'll adjourn. That shouldn't be too bad, it's all stuff we've already...
Make a motion to adjourn.
Well, the one with the component thing will be coming in. Because I'm in the process of doing it, he needs variances anyway, so he's gonna have to come through here and then go to DEP anyway. But we didn't want him to waste the effort and the money if it wasn't gonna fly, so,
Move to adjourn.
thank you.
Adjourn.
Can I add one?
I had one.